With stakeholder input, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has drafted an update to Washington Administrative Code, or WAC, Title 220, Chapter 500, Section 140, Firearms and Target Practicing. Hi, I'm Eric Gardner, Wildlife Program Director. This video answers some frequently asked questions about the draft changes, including what led to the changes and their anticipated impact. What led to this rule change? In recent years, we've seen an increase in target shooting on DFW-managed lands, as well as an overall increase in the number of people visiting DFW-managed lands. This increase in use has created several challenges, including increased risk of wildfires, concerns over public safety, and impacts to private property, littering, and damage to wildlife habitat. What are the goals of this rule update? WDFW is committed to continuing to provide shooting opportunities on our lands. However, we also need to protect public safety, reduce wildfire risk, and minimize damage to habitat. Who has been involved in drafting the rule update? In 2017, we formed a citizen advisory committee to address issues with target shooting on the Weenass Wildlife Area between Yakima and Ellensburg. The Weenass Wildlife Area Target Shooting Advisory Committee was made up of state and national interests, including the Hunters Heritage Council, the National Wildlife Association, as well as neighbors and affected landowners, local law enforcement, including Kittitas County Sheriff, and a broad array of recreational interests, such as hunters, target shooters, horseback riders, mountain bike riders, hikers, wildlife watchers, and bird dog trainers. Some local elected officials also served on the committee as ex officio members. Where is target shooting allowed on WDFW-managed lands? How will this change with the new rule? WDFW is committed to providing opportunities for target shooting on WDFW-managed lands. Under the draft rule, WDFW lands are open to target shooting at designated recreational target shooting areas and in compliance with posted regulations, as well as in other areas containing an earthen backstop and meeting other criteria defined by the rule. Targets must be placed in front of and within 8 feet of the backstop, and the person must be shooting at the lower half of the backstop. A backstop is not required when using archery equipment, crossbows, airbows, shotguns, discharging shots smaller than size BB, or air rifles firing projectiles at a rate of 800 feet per second or less. Will the updated rule affect hunting or hunting rules? No, the draft rule update will not affect hunting, hunting rules, or hunting dog training. What is the rulemaking process, and when will a new WDFW recreational target shooting rule go into effect? Recreational target shooting is currently regulated under Section 140 of Chapter 220-500 of the Washington Administrative Code. Any update to Chapter 220-500 must be adopted by the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission following a public process that ensures opportunities for public comment. The following state laws govern WDFW rulemaking activity. The Administrative Procedure Act requires that agencies conduct a process that ensures public involvement opportunities and considers the economic impact of its rules. The Regulatory Fairness Act requires agencies to consider disproportionate impacts of rules on small businesses. The State Environmental Policy Act requires agencies to consider environmental impacts of rules. Depending on the outcome of the public process, an update to the target shooting rule could be enacted as soon as summer of 2020. How does the draft rule update compare to existing rules on Washington state public lands? The proposed rule update is based on the current rules governing recreational target shooting on Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, lands as defined in Chapter 33252 of the Washington Administrative Code. Like DNR's rule, the WDFW update defines recreational target shooting, identifies when and where target shooting is allowed or prohibited, and defines allowable and prohibited targets for use on WDFW-managed lands. However, the proposed rule goes a step further by defining a backstop as an unobstructed earthen mound or bank at least 8 feet in height, which must stop the progress and contain all projectiles, ricochets, and fragments in a safe manner. Why do backstops need to be at least 8 feet in height? Literature on the subject recommends the minimum backstop height for developed shooting ranges to be between 10 and 25 feet, depending on the shooting distance, firearm type, downrange topography, and other factors. Implementing a minimum backstop height of 10 to 25 feet for target shooting on WDFW-managed lands would eliminate target shooting in many areas where shorter backstops would be sufficient to address safety concerns. The proposed backstop definition includes the requirement that the backstop, quote, must stop the progress of and contain all projectiles, ricochets, and fragments in a safe manner, end quote. Individuals engaged in target shooting must ensure that they are using a backstop at least 8 feet in height that meets this requirement, including a slope that is steep enough and comprised of earthen material that negates ricochets over the top or to the front or sides of the backstop. In addition to the backstop definition, targets must be placed in front of and within 8 feet of the backstop, and the person must be shooting at the lower half of the backstop. This requirement is intended to increase the probability that the backstop will be effective in stopping all projectiles and fragments. However, individuals are ultimately responsible for utilizing an effective backstop. What is the difference between a firearm and a gun that uses air or compressed gas? A firearm is defined in statute under RCW 9.41.010 as, quote, a weapon or device from which a projectile or projectiles may be fired by an explosive such as gunpowder, unquote. Under this definition, guns that use compressed air or gas are not considered firearms. However, they are included in the proposed rule because many air or compressed gas guns are now capable of firing at high velocities and or firing large caliber projectiles. Does the proposed rule update affect long-range target shooting? The proposed rule does not limit or preclude long-range target shooting as long as the requirements in the rule are met. Long-range shooters must utilize an unobstructed earthen backstop as defined in the rule and must also be certain the entire area between the shooter and the target, as well as the area beyond the target, is free of risk to people, animals, or property. Targets placed at distance and target debris must be collected after shooting is completed at the site. Will the rule update affect areas currently being used for target shooting on WDFW-managed lands? Areas being used for target shooting on WDFW-managed lands that meet the requirements in the proposed rule and do not pose issues related to safety or habitat concerns may continue to be used. However, areas that do not meet proposed rule requirements or that present safety, habitat, or other issues that cannot be eliminated or mitigated by improvements may no longer be used. Does WDFW have plans to build new or enhance existing shooting areas? WDFW intends to improve a few areas currently being used for recreational target shooting to provide a higher quality user experience and address new requirements under the draft rule. Additional areas may be developed or improved in the future, subject to funding availability. Why are there timing restrictions on the use of steel targets? To reduce fire risk, the draft rule update prohibits the use of steel targets outside of a department-designated shooting area from June 1 to September 30. WDFW may manage vegetation at department-designated shooting areas to reduce the risk of fire. Why aren't steel core or tracer bullets allowed? Fires have occurred on WDFW lands from the use of these projectiles. Steel core bullets can spark when hitting a rock or steel target, so are not allowed in order to reduce the risk of fire. What clay targets are allowed under the draft rule update? Not all clay targets are biodegradable and may contain ingredients harmful to the environment, such as petroleum-based binders. Environmentally friendly clay targets are readily available and are made from other ingredients such as sulfur, limestone, or forestry or agricultural products, and water-based paint that washes off. These clay targets are typically marked as biodegradable. When will WDFW address environmental issues associated with target shooting? For example, lead. WDFW will address environmental concerns during rulemaking through the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA process, as well as via the development of environmental stewardship plans for department-designated recreational target shooting areas. Will my family still be able to plink with BB guns without using a backstop? Compressed gas or air guns can be used without a backstop as long as they are not capable of shooting projectiles at velocities over 800 feet per second. However, all shooters are expected to exercise safe, basic firearm handling practices and be responsible in the handling and discharge of these devices. Can aluminum cans be used as targets? Aluminum cans, plastic bottles, or other containers are not allowed to be used as targets. The proposed rule requires targets be either commercially or privately made for the specific purpose of target shooting. How can the public provide comment on the proposed rule? The public will have opportunities to comment on the proposed rule via both the formal processes required by state law and via the WDFW website. WDFW will also host a series of public meetings in different parts of the state. WDFW will publish notice of those hearings and other information on how to provide comments on the WDFW website. The link is https://www.wa.gov/about/regulations/development. For more information about target shooting on Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife managed lands and to learn more about the draft rule update, please visit the link below this video and feel free to offer comments in the comments section.